All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to season two of Elemental Collision. Today I'm joined by a wonderful gentleman named Ben Lindsay, who is of Stand. Yep, Ben. And I had the pleasure of meeting Ben last year in Belfast as part of the Ignite Accelerator, run by a great set of folks, Chris McClellan, Ian Brown, and company up there. And it's a wonderful opportunity to circle back around and again have some conversations with amazing people that I've had the opportunity of intersecting with over the course of basically the year that was COVID. So, in the grand scheme of things, Ben, it's nice to have you here. And we're going to
Nice to be
talk
here.
about some stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that we can talk about. So, let's begin with give us a little bit about you. Who
Yeah.
are you and what do you do on this planet?
So at the minute, I'm in limbo, shall we say? What I did do for the last year and a half probably was, I was involved with a startup called Stand. I was one of the co-founders. Me and a girl that I went to university with started Stand. Um, and yeah, but what Stand was basically was we were making safety jewelry. So we had like a necklace pendant, looked like a normal piece of jewelry, but if you found yourself in an uncomfortable situation, press a button and it would send a message and share your location with a group of preset contacts. And it was really about trying to alleviate some of that overhanging fear that a lot of women in particular feel when they travel alone or when they're alone in general. Because of what we're fed through, like the media, our parents, school, from all the stuff that terrible stuff that happens in the world. And we were trying to lift some of that off to give people a bit more confidence to go and do the things that they wanted to do and live the lives that they wanted to do without having that restrict them. So yeah, it was a really nice year and a half. Unfortunately, it's come to an end now, probably about 2 months ago now, a month and a half ago, for very good reasons. But yeah, it was an interesting journey. And we learned a hell of a lot, especially through the 6 months that we were on the Ignite program. Like it just, it's a roller coaster of things that happened, even through COVID and everything. It's funny you mentioned us meeting back. Like we literally met, must have been like 2 weeks before everything went into complete lockdown.
Yeah.
On that mentor day. Maybe it must have been a little bit before that. Actually. Maybe it was a month because I remember there was someone there who wasn't shaking hands with anybody. He was doing elbow touches. And at the time, I was like, "Oh, this is so strange," and then that's like a normal part of life. You know what I mean? It's
I
so
don't I
weird.
don't know if I can ever get used to that though. The elbow touching
No,
thing.
definitely not.
I still
Yeah,
just want to shake someone's hand, you know. Yeah.
it's weird. But yeah, when we ended up finding out, whenever we went into lockdown with Stan, we were kind of like we were building out some IoT tech, and we were probably doing the wrong thing at the time. Looking back on it, we were trying to build like a overcomplicated proof of concept. But lockdown was kind of a good kick in the arse for us, to be honest. It was like, okay, we've got like 4 months left of cash or whatever it is. We need to launch something, and we're not going to be able to do what we wanted to do with COVID and the restrictions of testing and stuff like that. So it was kind of like, right, okay, what's like the simplest thing we can do? And we ended up contacting a company that makes some smart Bluetooth buttons,
Mhm.
got some of their things, designed like jewelry around it, made an agreement with them to sell under our own brand and stuff like that, and use their software as well, which was like a really big boost as well. So we had like PCBs and we had software up and running. All we had to do was essentially make a hardware casing. We
Mhm.
did that in about 6 or 8 weeks
Wow.
and started doing pre-orders. Um, and what we really found from the pre-orders was there were two like really super distinct groups of people buying. For one, we spent a lot of money on paid advertising and didn't get a lot back,
Yeah.
which is never a good thing. But it was an interesting test and it proved a lot to us. But and the really interesting thing for me was that before we'd done any like exchange of like money, we had a very mixed bag of people that were interested in this thing. But as soon as we started charging, the two groups of people that were buying were like super defined. It was freaky, to be honest. They were either like young women who have like severe anxiety disorders to the point where they have like dissociative episodes and like
Mhm.
just freeze up and go into a state of paralysis, waking paralysis or woken paralysis, or people that have epilepsy or who experience seizures,
Mhm.
um, which is really interesting because we hadn't even tried to target people with epilepsy or people who take seizures, um, and one of the parts of why we stopped Stand was the fact that those two markets have like a really painful need, and it's quite interesting. but they were really, really small markets to try and hit with something at the scale that we were trying to hit it with. And then as well as that, at the same time, so throughout this last year and a half, whenever we started Stand, me and my co-founder Emma were working full time on it, and then because of like money restrictions and being very broke, we could only fund one of us staying on full time. So I was on full time, and Emma took a graduate job as an engineer, a gas engineer, and she was doing like evenings and weekends with me. It was tough going, like for the year and a half it was in it. And the last couple of months, I sort of got the feeling that, you know, okay, maybe she wasn't as pushed on board and stuff like that and all the rest. And I just had a conversation with her. I brought it up, and she was just kind of like, "Yeah, I don't know if this life is for me. This whole startup thing, it's really, really mentally difficult. Never mind the work and hours and all the rest. The like lack of direction and never knowing what to do is like a big mental tool, and it is. Sure. I love it. Like I don't think I could do anything else now. I've been completely spoiled, but it's tough. Like it definitely isn't for everybody. It's definitely not the glamorous, you know, thing that it's painted out to be. So Emma decided to take a step back from Stan, and she didn't want to do it anymore. And then for like a month or so, I kind of explored a couple of different things. I thought the seizure thing, the epilepsy thing, was very interesting. Looked a bit into it, but there's a whole load of big barriers around, you know, medical cert and stuff like that, and getting something approved, and what you can and can't say about what your device does and stuff like that. And then as well as that, like hardware's tough. Like it's super slow, super slow, and you need like a huge amount of capital behind you to do anything in hardware. And like being frank, the investment ecosystem in Northern Ireland isn't really capable of backing a hardware business. It hasn't, not to my knowledge anyway, hasn't done very successfully, other than probably Chris from Ignite, who got back pretty well. But he actually had to go to America for that, so you know, it is what it is. So yeah,
America tends to look favorably on hardware for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think you have to be kind of a little bit crazy, a little bit willing to take a big risk on hardware, and also you have to have like buckets of cash. So it doesn't happen here. But then also in the mix of this whole thing, there was this big existential question for me, which was like, you know, okay, Emma's now gone, right? I'm a man trying to run and operate a female-oriented product business. And I had to kind of figure out, right, okay, is that a story I can tell myself, never mind tell other people? And it really wasn't. Like, you know, it's not fair and representative for me to say and try to build something that is completely female oriented. I will never have the perspective of a woman in that way, especially with something that's so intimate. Like, you know, one of the things that whenever we started looking into all this was that, you know, the almost all women, like almost the majority of women, have this overhanging fear that I talked about a little bit earlier, and it's really, really specific. It's actually specifically about being sexually assaulted, which is horrific. Like when you think about it, you know, and that's again from, you know, the media, school, all these things that we're exposed to, all these cases that come up in the news that are like really, really amplified, and looking at the hard fact numbers here, at least in the UK, I'm not sure what the case is for the rest of the world. The stats on that happening to you as you walk home are actually super low. It's mostly a domestic violence thing, which is very, very sad. But that fear still persists in the majority, if not all, women, and it's something I've never experienced because I didn't grow up that way. I'm, you know, born male, and you know, I've been brought up in a way that's never been a fear for me. So to try and tell myself that I can build that product effectively, it just didn't seem right. So over the course of probably about a month, I worked it out in my head that, okay, now's the time to change, and now's the time to do something different and do something else. So yeah, it was, I suppose, a big mental block and kind of painful at the time, but really, really happy I made that decision. It was the right decision, and it made a lot of sense. So yeah, looking back, it's a lot less painful.
A lot of introspection in that. I definitely hear you on the on our unique perspective on life. You know, well, being white and being male, right? You know, we don't have these things. You know, I got 2 daughters, right? Teenagers at that, and you know, so I have the perspective of that overprotective father. Like, all right, you know, You're not going anywhere by yourself. You're not going to do any of these things. But that's a different role. It's a different perspective, right? I'm not looking at them as individual adults making their own volitional decisions about the places they're going to go, things they're going to do, right? I still have, for lack of a better way of putting, control over where they go, how, and when, right? I can't
Yeah.
drive, so that makes it even better. And my community I live in is not, you can walk around the buildings, but you're not going to get into town kind of thing from here, right? So, and I think your perspective is also, it's interesting because a lot of folks are unwilling to think like that. They have an idea and they just want to see it through, and they're very dogmatic about that. But like you're saying, there's this existential: is this the right thing for me, in my entitlement, in my privilege, in my space to be
Yeah,
doing this?
100%.
And you're kind of loath to kind of like step back from it because it was your idea, right? It's like, oh, this is my thing.
Mm.
But being able to countenance that, and I think there's a lot of recognition, and makes you a good feminist, I suppose, is the a better way of looking at it to a certain extent. But it makes you a better human, right? You understand that, hey, maybe I
100%.
don't have the right thing. It doesn't mean you couldn't be involved, and I think you have that perspective as well. But the other balance on that is someone else's perspective that is unique and special and is pertinent to that particular application of what you're trying to do. And boards 1, 2, 3, right? The implications there, and she's talked a lot about this, is part of that diversity of boards is getting those different perspectives, making your board, whether it be racially diverse or culturally diverse, gender diverse, right? It's really trying to hone in on that particular perspective that changes the way that you kind of view these things, because all those different angles on life are going to get you to where you need to be. So definitely hear you on that perspective. It's
Yeah, it's so important. Even like silly stuff. I remember when I first, like, one of my first jobs in, like, I was doing some placement somewhere, an engineering place or whatever, and we as interns got dumped with organizing the Christmas party, which was great from one perspective. Big budget to go and lash a drink into everybody and have a great
yeah,
time and all the rest. But none of us ever considered, about people having kids. And it's such a simple thing, but you don't have kids, you don't think about it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's the same with everything else. You haven't experienced it, you don't think about it because why would you? You don't know that, or it's
yeah,
not that you don't know that it happens, but it doesn't happen to you, so you don't consider it. It's a weird one.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
the other thing was when I was going through that kind of thinking period or whatever for that month, I was doing serious amount of reading on stuff I probably should have read ages ago. Like, it was to the point I was coming home every day with a headache because I was literally just sitting for like 10 hours straight just reading
Yeah.
stuff. Most of it like blog posts and stuff from like the YC Startup School and Paul Graham stuff and all that
Mhm.
interesting stuff, and a lot of stuff actually on founder market fit. Um, and if you're not, well, I'm sure you probably are, but maybe somebody listening isn't familiar with founder market fit. But it's kind of the idea is that people have a certain fit to build a certain type of product or service for a certain market because they are probably the same as the people in that market. So
Mhm.
you have an interest in dirt bikes, you can probably build a great dirt bike company. Or you've grown up your entire life with a disability, you can probably build a service to help people with a disability or a similar disability. Um, so looking back now, I think that's super important. I think it's really, really important because it does grant you that perspective to go and build something very specific for a certain market, and also just to motivate yourself about things. Because if you're interested in something, it's a lot easier to work around the clock or think about it all the time as opposed to something that maybe you're not so much. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's super important.
Yeah. Being able to be passionate about what you're doing is kind of a key part of all this stuff, you know.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a knock-on question to a lot of stuff. I mean, in the course of the year and a half that you're running Stand, you had an opportunity to look, get some data on community, right? And I ask everybody that comes on to talk about what community means to them. So in your own words, and frame it however you wish, whether through the lens of answer a stand, if you will, like, hey, I stand determined community, our community to be, you talked a little bit about it earlier, but also through your own self. What have you discovered as part of your journey about what community actually means to you?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of things in here. I think for me personally, I really, really like communities, but I'm also really, really bad at them. Like I don't think I could ever build a community. I no chance. I just don't have the in person. I'm like quite a I don't know. I feel like I can get on with people quite well, but online, I don't know. Like on forums and stuff like that, I don't get the etiquette. I don't get the whole
Yeah.
Facebook thing. I don't know what you're supposed to do. I'm internet socially awkward or whatever you want to call it.
Sure. Sure.
But I love being part of communities because I feel a real sense of I don't know, like a nice support system, like a bit of family or whatever about them, and a lot of this links back to the Ignite community from the pre-accelerator that we were on because this year especially that's been super important for me. You know, for the 3.5 months or whatever it was that we were working from home, and you know you weren't seeing anybody other than the people in your house and the four walls around you, other than going to get your shopping for food or whatever.
Yep.
It was really difficult, and just being able to well at least once a week, probably twice a week, hop on Zoom with like a bunch of people, a bunch of people that you get on with really well, have a similar sort of challenges to you, similar sort of interests and all the rest was really, really nice. And then also the fact that all those people were there, it was so easy just to like ping somebody a message and be all like, hey, do you want to like, I don't know, have a cup of coffee or whatever, have a chat. It was so nice. I feel like that support system this year especially has been strained, but has been so important to so many people. And I don't know where the hell I'd be without it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's been so good. So I love being part of communities. I really do. I'm probably over enthusiastic about it too much as well sometimes, where I scare people with my proactiveness about them. But yeah, then maybe that's why I'm bad at building communities. I just scare people away. But yeah, and then from Stan perspective, I suppose the interesting thing for me about communities was actually the difference I saw whenever we started selling, right? So before we started selling, as I said, we had this kind of mixed batch of people, and yeah, the engagement was okay. We get some people coming in, some people messaging us with really, really nice stuff, saying thank you so much for building this product, etc. That was really nice to hear. But it was like once a month or whatever, something might pick up. And then whenever we started selling and I started to dive into some of the epilepsy stuff and the seizure stuff, I went online and there were a couple of Facebook groups specifically that were based around, okay, people who have epilepsy, people take seizures, sharing and supporting one another. And as I use them as a research tool. Look on that, whether you want to see it as like a bad thing or whatever, a morally bad thing. I was totally upfront about what I was doing. I was just like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I just want to learn a bit more about this. I'm not trying to sell you or anything like that. And most people were really nice about that. It was really scary that actually I thought I was going to get a whole lot of hate mail or something, But it was really interesting. But the willingness of people to talk about this pain that they had and share the pain with each other and support each other through that community. It was like day and night to what we'd seen before. It was so strong, and even the responses from people there, because they all had this same thing going on that was their problem and their thing. They were all so willing to try and give to make it better for all of them. It's really nice, really, really super nice. And it was just such a strong vibe and pull off it, compared to what we'd seen before. It was amazing, incredible.
It's interesting. I love the kind of duality there, right? We talked, again, I think through season 1 or whatever we want to call it, we talked a lot about community and the intentionality behind it, right? You're right. Like we can go into Slack communities, we can go into these things, and we want to be ourselves, right? Yeah, we are the shining example of who we're going to be. And a lot of that stuff is that, you don't have a lot of that social queuing with these online communities and stuff. Like you talk to Christian and Laura, right? It's like, oh, we're building out these mentor communities. And all of a sudden it's like, wait, how am I supposed to interact with these people? And they're probably the most, effervescent folks I've ever met in my life. And I love them for that, right? But for us, I'm an introvert by nature, right? It's not one of those things that I'm like, hey, let's go and do this. I'm excited about, I like managing communities from a programmatic standpoint. Like I do a lot of that stuff. I do it for Scale Ireland, right? And I do a couple of these things and try to get involved in them, but a lot of that's intentional, right? I have to get off my ass to go in there and actually like, I'm going to participate in this. I'm not going to be a dick about it. I'm going to, do this type of thing. I think on the flip side, also what you recognize going into communities and understanding that not all communities are built around these I won't call them positive purposes or positive ontologies, right? A lot of them are based around the needs or these kind of symptoms of situations that happen. Medical disability is a huge one, social disability as well, right? However you kind of frame or put this into context or whatever. And yes, you were being ethical by this, by relaying, hey, I'm using this for research and stuff. But I've had to find this in the PhD stuff that I'm doing too. It's like, how do you go in and try to, I won't say use the hurt, but use the hurt to try to find something that's better, that you can do better, that you can do different. And so communities tend to kind of glom together. We see this in politics, right? The negative kind of, groupings of folks. Yes, politics. God, how many more days do I have? I have 16 more days before the regime changes, as it were. So context clue, that's when this is being filmed. But a lot of that stuff, comes together, and I don't think people just don't tend to look at community as being agitated towards that. There's a cause, there's a purpose, intention, but it's good to see that
It's
kind of
almost
framing.
like startups and stuff as well. It's you never start a community for the crack or for no reason. There's a problem there. There has to be a problem,
Yeah.
and the community is essentially a type of solution to that problem. And yeah, I think you're right. Even the utility based community. So like the Scale Ireland one, that's like totally for supporting different startups and stuff like that. And it's like a very utilitarian
Yeah.
community, but it's because there's problems there. Obviously, like
Yeah.
there's a problem in, I don't know, people getting access to fundraising or access to advice or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been great to kind of watch that. Yeah, it's a different type of flow, and you're looking at something that's hyper local as well. You're looking at something that's all Ireland, right? You're looking at, what can we do? Like funders, access these things, help advice, webinars. How can we help? And yeah, right. It's identifying those kind of problems and going through those and challenges. Thankfully, it's not answers in search of questions, right? It's just more of the opposite way around. So I appreciate your perspective on that, and that's great for people to hear, because especially as you want to go back into this, right? You mentioned like, hey, you're not sore on this idea of going out there and finding
Oh
what's
yeah, I'm
next. So
completely stuck on it.
yeah, so I mean, what's going through your head about what some of the things that you want to do next year?
Yeah, so I spent probably a month or 5 or 6 weeks trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And what I found out is that that's a terrible thing to do. I basically ended up trying to build a process around the best way to come up with ideas. So and I think the process actually stands. And actually, as an exercise, it's a really good thing to do to get the cogs turned in your head. So
Sure.
I was like, looking at all the different ways you could possibly do this, and I was like, right, okay, best thing to do is start with a market, find a market that I found a market fit for, because then everything I come up with found a market fits in there, right? Find a problem that that market has, go and talk to a bunch of people, and then build a solution, which is the basic principle of it. And I was like, right, okay, I'll come up with 40 different things, and I'll just start killing them all as quickly as possible the minute there's a road bump, and cutting them down until I have like three that are like, I just can't kill them because they're completely bulletproof.
Yeah.
And I started doing that, and it was interesting. One of the things is that probably 40 ideas is a lot to try and
Yeah.
to try
Yeah.
and kill and test and stuff like that. Like two or three is maybe probably more manageable at a time, which is interesting. But also the quality of stuff I was coming up with was generally pretty poor, because I was kind of forcing the process a little bit. Whereas whenever I stopped, there's this thing, somebody explained it to me recently, and there was a really nice word for it that I can't remember, but basically the way it was explained to me years ago was that you should stop thinking so hard. So whenever you think really really hard about something, you generally get tunneled into a zone or type of thinking, whereas when you forget about it for a little while, it kind of sits in the back of your brain and ticks over there without you consciously thinking about it. And then when you come back to it, or when something triggers a thought, all of a sudden you make a connection, and it's like, oh wow, this could go there. And I found that those ideas that have come up since then have been far superior than anything I came up with before. And also I stopped writing stuff down because the really good ones just naturally keep coming back to your brain. You,
Yeah.
you can't ignore them, as opposed to writing them down. But that being said, I think it's something that's probably going to take a while for me to figure out what I want to do next. It's like a 6 month or yearly thing to try
Sure.
and really find something that's probably super, super painful. Um, and in the meantime, I have got something new that I'm working on. Don't want to, well, I suppose when this is out, when's this out again?
This will be out.
Little
I'll
while,
get more
yeah.
specific dates, but probably mid to late February is where I'm aiming at this point.
Yeah, I'll not get super specific about it,
Yeah, that's fine.
but I'm gonna go and work with one of the startups that was on the pre-accelerator with us,
Nice.
from Ignite, which is super super nice, because like again that community has just been so important. The people. The more I go on, the more I realize it's about the people you meet,
Yeah.
and the connections with them. Like it doesn't really matter what you're doing; it's kind of who you're doing it with, because you can have the best idea in the world and the worst team in the world, or you can have the worst team or the worst idea in the world and the best team in the world. It's
Yeah.
kind of a balance between those things. So I feel like the people that you're there with are super super important, and that group's just been amazing. So I'm really happy to be staying in it and to be stuck in it with somebody who actually I knew probably a long time before the program, has been kind of gone through all of the different little things. Like whenever we first started, we were on this program called Venture for Success, which was, it was kind of mad, to be honest, but you got some, like, it's not even that great, but at the time it seemed good. Free
Yeah.
consultancy work,
Yeah.
which was basically just labor hours for people to do things for you, which was okay. It helped
Yeah.
a little bit. Wasn't really worth it looking back. And then we were on a different accelerator type thing that gave us some free workspace together, and then we were on Propel together. So it's kind of nice that relationship has kind of seen its way through to this point where I'm going to go now work with them for a while. So
Sure.
yeah, that's something I'm super excited for in the new year now, because it's a new challenge that I really know has legs, and I know the founder has great founder market fit, and they're going to do great things. So I'm super excited to be a part of that journey for a while, if not for longer.
Sure.
God knows what way things can go. It's the story. I always tell people the story. I tell them will be completely different in 2 weeks' time, because the things just change so much.
Yeah.
It's impossible to predict.
World's changing every day, man. I mean, it's yeah, the calendar clicks over, geopolitical things happen, right? We all have that thing.
COVID.
COVID, Brexit. I mean, all
Yeah.
these things that kind of come into play, right? And it's changed. I appreciate your agility on this stuff, and also the willingness to help. Jump back in. I was impressed by the cohort, and that I got to talk to. All, like, again, I think I've gone through almost every single person in that and talked to them at least once, and a couple I've missed, right? Dustin, Dustin comes to mind, right? Like his perspective on things is incredible. There's
Oh, Austin.
Austin, sorry. Austin Dustin.
Right.
I knew there was a Sten in there somewhere, but
pretty close.
Yeah. But like you were saying, like somebody that's going in there and trying to answer a need because he's a part of that community and whatever. But a lot of incredible folks. Same thing with Alistair's,
Yeah.
Starticus and the folks that came out of that. Looking at some of the things he's done through that group. But no, I think it's awesome that you're able to go back in and provide help. I mean, you have skills and abilities, man. You got that marketing brain, you got that recognition of those type of things. I mean, again, it's only a failure if you never try. So your ability to
Exactly,
kind of provide perspective to something that is ongoing, is going to be completely valuable and worthwhile, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. The marketing brain you mentioned there is pretty interesting. I think that's a really, really good way of putting it. Because yeah, over the last, like, I don't know, I started off, I suppose, kind of come from a bit of a salesy background. Like my family sold cars all my life, so
Yeah.
I've been kind of around that and involved in that. But I've always been like, not super technical, but I've always been more like maths inclined. Like I did an engineering based degree and design based degree and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was never really deep into like looking into marketing and stuff. But like the last year and a half, I've just got so big into it, and it is like a whole mindset. And actually, it's really funny, I think, because there are so many links back to the scientific part of my brain. Like it's like marketing's just a big test. Everything's a test. Everything's a test. You know what I mean? But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's so emotional and there's so much psychology behind it and stuff like that. You know, it's a really unique field to be in. There's such a mixture of skills and ways of thinking that you need involvement. You know, you really need to zoom out and zoom in all the time. You know,
Yeah.
it's funny.
Definitely, yeah. Irony of all this is, I'm in a marketing group inside of inside of my day job, right? So you sit there and we work a lot on the messaging. Well, I work specifically on market messaging, right? But a lot of that comes down to, and again, that's why it's always fascinating to talk to all you folks, because your perspective on how you talk to people about what you do. I mean, that's marketing in its seat, right? You're talking about your parents and being, your family being involved in selling cars, and a lot of that is how do you have it's conversations first. A sale never is a hard press, right? Yes,
Mhm.
there may be the tokenized version of car salesman, used car salesman specifically, right? You want to buy this car,
Oh yeah.
right? But a
Oh my
lot of
God.
these things come from,
I have to tell people all the time, like, please don't judge me. That's not the way it works. It's not like that.
well, you didn't put sawdust in the Gears. Don't worry, it's not gonna your transmission's not filled with motor oil.
Not if we like, yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. Don't worry, your car won't be set on fire, within hours of buying it. No, but like a lot of that just does come down to these type of things, right? It's conversations. It's really kind of what's between the lines. A lot of it, all the stuff we do in print is what we do in print, right? I can go in an airport, I can see things from my company, and I can say, hey, that's great. Looks nice, looks pretty. Really, nothing gets sold by an airport billboard. It doesn't.
Mhm.
But kind of similar to what you were saying about that kind of background processing, how I do things in a lazy kind of asynchronous way with the ideas. It's something that sits in there and percolates. So there's the idea that these things persist. It's the idea that these things are kind of lodged in there. I saw this and I saw this image, this identification, and this has some level of permanence to me, right?
Yeah.
How I turn that back around. These interesting conversations lead to, hopefully a sale or purchase order at some point along the way. But
Yeah.
that's a
It's
lot of
it,
it.
it it's super interesting when you talk about that path. I've always been really interested in funnels and funnels from the perspective that, okay, somebody might, you know, see a billboard, as you say, and then, oh, the next day they click on a Facebook ad and it brings them to a landing page, and, oh, okay, they might do something, they might not do something. Then they search for your company online, or they go on through your Instagram profile. All these different ways that people can discover and start to learn about your business and go through, like Google has their like 4 steps and all the rest thing.
Sure.
Um, for the moment of, I don't know whatever you call it, but
Yeah.
they've always really interested me, and I think at the start I tried to kind of like gamify them or whatever, and like yeah, I could get into a whole conversation about how like traditional education starts to gear us towards gamifying everything and trying to cheat systems and look
Yeah.
for quick
Oh,
fixes. But yeah, that's a whole other thing. But at the start I tried to like gamify the phones and all the rest, but to me at least, the more I do it, the more I realize that it's really not that simple at all. Like it's so much more complex. There's so many different routes people can take and so many different lines of thinking they can go down. It's unbelievable. Like but I suppose there probably are ways you can crack that. And the real value is in finding those ways that you can kind of crack that system a little bit. Yeah.
got to get to the human element at some point, right? And again, humans are the ones
100%.
that make the decisions on how these things go, and so a lot of it comes down to how you connect. Talk about this in my PhD program. Right? How you connect your head to your heart, right? That's how you align people. It's how you align these ideas. It's how you always come back to. It's called a plumb line, right? Out of construction, but like it's how you align people to those ideals, and people are willing to buy based on that stuff, right? Again, as you saw through your community split, the people that were going to do this, these were people that had concerns, that they were aligned head to heart. It may not be, again, it's traumatic for them. But it was something that answered, it lined up with that perspective. And that's where they went. Hyper focused, hyper local, hyper, whatever word you choose to use. And then the medical disability side as well, kind of lined up against that, but it was there. It was, kind of in perspective alignment. It's always trying to get the fringes of everything that you do, right? How do I get those? How do I get the non-outliers? Or how do I get, some of the, get that center point where it's they could go anyway. They could fall off on one side, they could fall on the other. They don't need it, but they want it, right? It's hard, but I appreciate your time this morning, Ben. And it's always great to have these conversations. And I think it's awesome that you've gone through this introspection process, right? You come out the other side, you still have a smile on your face, which is always a good sign. And you got something else lined up, but you haven't given up the passion for doing incredible things. So, from me to you and what little comfort this is, we're going to stay in touch. And I look forward to seeing what else you're going to do. And, by any, or for all intents and purposes, feel free to knock on my door for anything that I can possibly help you with there as well. So
100%. I appreciate it. And likewise, I don't know if I'm in the position to help you at the minute, but if I ever am, it's always door open, I love that about all this stuff in this community. There is a real willingness of everybody to help each other, because I suppose everybody knows how crap things are sometimes. So yeah, no, thanks for having me on, Dave. I've had good fun. It's been an interesting chat this morning, especially about the coffee.
Yeah. Oh, we can have I think we're gonna do at some point. Alex has floated this idea, but we're gonna do like a virtual tasting stuff. So I'll give you a heads up when that shows around. I can get a collection of folks, and no, we have a couple of roasteries down in Ireland, right? That are seem to be willing to kind of jump on that as well. So maybe we can float some good product out to some folks.
Did a little wine one with the tasting tour guys from Propel a while ago, and it was amazing. It was so good. Yeah. So nice.
Oh, they're on my list of people. Yeah, I've talked with them a couple of times now in the past few months. Yeah, their pivot's been interesting to see what they've done with that. But yeah, it's phenomenal. Anyway, appreciate your time this morning, and when this goes out, I will make as much noise about it as possible for you.
Likewise.